Hello, podcast listeners. You are now listening to the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast. I'm your host, Jordan River, and I want to thank you for tuning in today. Before we get started, please share the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast with a friend or a peer. We appreciate you spreading the show. It's how we grow. It really does make a difference. Make sure you're subscribed. Give us a good rating and review. Thank you to all you loyal listeners to this unique and fantastic program. Today, we're jumping back into functional medicine. This is a topic that's come up a few times on the show, and I really feel is the future of wellness. And I'm really excited to speak to today's guest, who is a practicing functional medicine physician. It's just that simple. Dr. Angela Mosely is with us. How are you doing today, Dr. Mosely?
I'm great, Jordan. Thanks for having me. How are you?
Doing excellent. I loved speaking with you off air. I've been looking for another episode on functional medicine. I know you do work with people's energy levels specifically, so I'm really interested in that. Thank you for coming on the program. I do appreciate you taking time today.
You are very welcome. I'm excited and glad to be here.
Can you give a little professional background on yourself first? What brought you to medicine and what brought you to functional medicine?
So I've always wanted to be a doctor since I was 5. I'm one of those people who knew really young, and that dream stayed alive with me. Once I got into med school, though, I saw kind of a different picture of what I thought medicine would be, particularly when we were learning about oncology and things like that. I mean, just certain things that didn't make sense to me. How do you kill or damage the majority of the body cells just to target cancer cells or the disruptive cells? And so, just certain things seem off. But I went into practice anyway. I became a hospitalist right out of my residency training. And I was seeing a lot of people who were really sick. I was working long hours in the hospital, up to 100 hours a week. Oh. And I would see people in their 20s with cancer on a regular basis, not like just 1 or 2. This is a weekly occurrence. And I was at a small community hospital, not one of the major academic centers. And this is what we were seeing. Also, people in their 30s coming in with heart attacks, people in their 40s with strokes. And this is like I said, a very common thing that I was seeing. And it was a little bit odd because they had never taught us that you would see these kind of conditions in people so young. You don't see those things until you're getting 65 and older and those sorts of things. And so I started asking myself questions to try and understand why these patterns of health were happening. Why were people getting sicker younger? And I figured it had to be something to do with our environment, with our food, with our lifestyle. And so I started reading and just listening to the patients a lot more. Another one of the triggers for me was listening to my thyroid patients.
Oh yeah, that's a huge for those who know me personally. I don't like to talk about personal stuff too much. I like to focus on the amazing guests on the show. But my daughter has a sublingual thyroid. She is one of those people with she has a hypothyroidism. So this is something that is an epidemic that really wasn't very prevalent at all just a few short decades ago. Correct me if I'm wrong. And now is really, really rampant. Maybe due to all the endocrine disruptors or whatever it may be. There's a lot of problems with our endocrine system in our modern society, right?
Absolutely. And the other thing I'm seeing is there are issues with the way we're taught to treat thyroid. Yes. Typically with levothyroxine or Synthroid is going to be the brand name of that. And I was following the protocol to a T. I'm the type of person, if you teach me something, I'm following it exactly. And so I did. And then, my patients would come back and I'm like, great, your levels are normal. Your TSH is in range. How do you feel? And so I'm excited for them. Yeah. Yeah. And that's pretty much the response I got. And I was like, what? I mean, no, we got your levels normal. You're taking the medicine. You're doing everything. What do you mean you don't feel better? And after I got that from patient after patient after patient, I started scratching my head like something cannot be right here. Wow. So I really started doing a lot of reading on thyroid testing and levels and how to treat thyroid. And there's a lot of data in the research that points otherwise, kind of to treat other than the way that we were taught to treat.
Yeah,
And
very interesting.
so,
I love that you just brought this up. This we didn't talk about this before the interview, and it's so pertinent. My wife dug through the book "Stop the Thyroid Madness" and learning about
mhm,
these more natural thyroid hormones and desiccant thyroid and all of this. I think that okay, here's my point. It's really important that we explore this stuff, right? Because like you said, if the goal is wellness, it's one thing if you're just
right.
trying to get the levels right, but if the goal is wellness, boy, we really need to dive into this and see if there's alternatives and research those alternatives thoroughly, whether or not they are effective, you know?
Absolutely. So, that was one of the big clues that got me to reading and looking, and started reading more on my own, the journal articles, to see what information was out there that could help me help my patients better at
Wow.
that time. Then I discovered the Institute of Functional Medicine, started taking some of their courses. And that's when I kind of got a more broad picture about gut health and adrenals and energy levels, and,
Mm.
all of these different hormones and bioidentical hormones and inflammatory markers. And I'm like, oh, there's so much more we can be doing for people
Wow.
that can help them live a better quality life and just feel better than what we were actually doing.
Right. And I mean, I really try to be even handed on this show, which is, it's like, what system does excel at everything? We are so good at the acute here in the West. You know what I mean? We're like miracle workers with some of the stuff
Yeah.
we do with acute syndromes and pathologies and stuff like that. So, but what system is great at all things? Really, when it comes to preventative wellness and just like, overall kind of functional wellness, day-to-day wellness, we need some help. We need a second school of thought. I almost feel like we need to split, MDs up like we kind of did the military around the turn of the you know what I mean? The turn of that century, we split up. There was no Navy, there was no air. I almost feel like we need two divisions of medicine, almost like acute and functional, to kind of go forward properly. But yeah, I love that. I love that you were trying to, get your patients to that level of wellness. And it sounds like there is more and more of this type of research around all these types of, gut bacteria testing and functional blood testing. And do you feel there's a bit of a wave, like I don't want to say a resurgence, but a bit of a wave going on, a trend?
I think absolutely. Doctors are looking for answers. I think most physicians do want to serve their patients a lot better. So a lot more physicians are coming into understanding the body more holistically. Also, patients are looking for answers, and they're looking for answers on their own. And
Yeah.
they're looking for people who can help guide them through the process, because it can be overwhelming and you're not quite sure what does one symptom mean or another.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking a little bit about energy levels. Feeling fatigue or tired or low energy can be anything
It's
almost,
so common too, though. It's wild how many people are just day to day dragging ass. You know what I mean? It's crazy. And I think that a lot of
Yep.
the trouble, obviously we do a lot of coffee talk on this show. I think a lot of the trouble with the trouble people have with coffee and with caffeine actually comes from the rest of their lifestyle. Because there's something going on here. And like you said, it's probably different for everybody, but I have a feeling that the main contributors are diet, screens, and sleep. And I think that the effects of those not being in balance affect your gut health incredibly. And I think that's what's causing people's the widespread issues we have of mental health. Everyone's in a mild depression, fatigue. Everybody's all worn out and fatigued. Now, this is a very unscientific. I'm not a doctor, but this is just my logical brain that I've observed looking around the world and looking at how people are zombified and looking at, well, what are they doing? They're staring at their phones. They're doing that until the moment they go to bed. They're not getting enough sleep. They're not exercising so their sleep is proper. They're eating junk food and stuff. Their microbiome, specifically in their gut, is being hammered, and that's got to affect your hormones and your adrenals. Is my layperson kind of connections there? Does that check out with the research that you've done? Please, don't let me set you up. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Not at all. I think it does correlate quite a bit. And I think we underestimate how much we can actually control as far as our health and how we feel. A lot of what contributes to your energy level are things that you do yourself at home.
Yes, lifestyle choices.
exactly. Am I going to come to your house and measure exactly how much kale you ate today and then how much you ate tomorrow? No. So
Well,
it's
that
not
puts you in a tough
exactly.
position. Yeah, that puts you in a tough position as a doctor because you say, Sanjeev Chopra said when he tells his patients to exercise, he writes out a prescription. He's trying to get them to follow through with it. So that puts you in a tough spot as a doctor. But I imagine the people coming to you are willing to put in that work because they're fed up with the way their health is.
Yeah. Right. And so once people get to me, they've typically seen 8+ doctors before they see me, and some max of 20 that they've seen, and they haven't been able to figure out what was going on.
That's wild.
And the issue wasn't necessarily that complicated. You just kind of have to know what to look for. And there, like we said, it's multifactorial. So all these issues overlap. So if the diet isn't right, if the sleep isn't right, if you're stressed out and at a job that is overworking you, and you're having social issues going on at the same time, and your hormones are out of balance because of toxicity or whatever sort of endocrine disruptors that you're being exposed to or have been exposed to, the half-life on toxins are in the decades. So you're talking about 2-3 decades or more. So if you've gotten exposed as a child, most of those are still there in significant levels when you're 40, 50, 60 years old.
Do you test for toxin levels? I've heard of people, because I've heard a lot of back and forth doctors saying that this is hokum. And then I listen to like Joe Rogan and some of these people get tested for toxin levels and they're like really, really high. Like levels of arsenic from someone who had many, many, many tattoos and he had attributed it to his tattoos or something. Is that really something you can test and something you work in?
You can. And so these aren't standard tests that the conventional system is dealing with. So if you deal with more functional tests, I would use the Genova test for toxins, and they have several in their line of testing. And I've used those, and it's not the first thing I check. Usually I try to get people to change their lifestyle first. Control the things you can control. I can't control what you got exposed to at 4 or 5 years old. We can't do anything about that. We can detox you if we need to, but let's deal with what we can handle now.
And it probably fixes the problem a lot of the percentage of the time, I imagine.
Exactly. And then if it doesn't correct with the standard treatments, then I start asking more questions like, well, maybe we should test you for toxicity. And a lot of times in those people who are resistant to improvements with the standard protocols will improve once you detox. That's
wild. And the one thing that really set me over the edge was I saw a study or heard a podcast where they reviewed a study about 9/11 first responders. And obviously this is a very extreme case, but I'd imagine that this is where it's most evident. 9/11 responders had a bunch of, from collapsing buildings and jet fuel and all that stuff. They had massive levels of heavy metals stored in their body. I don't know where it stores, in their tissues, in their blood. It's all throughout. And they were getting all these diseases years down the road because of the heavy metals that were stored. And so they started testing these people and what removed them. And they found that infrared saunas are extremely effective at removing. How crazy is that? I'm sure you knew that, by the way. But how crazy is that an infrared sauna, like, I don't know. It seems outside of the box. It seems a little counterintuitive, but that was a real study that basically points to a lot of the work that these functional medicine doctors do, like you said, especially when the regular diet changes and sleep changes aren't working.
Right.
It's crazy.
And infrared saunas do work, and I definitely recommend it for certain people. Certain sorts of detoxes are too harsh on certain people's body and their biochemistry. So sometimes infrared sauna can be a little bit more gentle. Epsom salt baths can be a little bit more gentle. But everybody's different. So everybody handles detox differently. And so if they're having a reaction, you just kind of back off and let the body do it gently and naturally over time. It's not something you flip a switch and all the toxins are going to be gone.
This is really wild. And I really hope, like I said, that there's room. I hope that there isn't, because there's such everything's so polarized all the time. And I feel like there's almost an animosity between alternative practitioners and regular practitioners sometimes. And I don't sense that with you, which I really appreciate. I feel like we've gone all the way off course from the questions, but I don't even care. How much, I know doctors and guests hate when I make them kind of rate things, But what are some of the like top contributors you find to the crisis that we have? Is there a massive percentage of the cases that lead back to repairing the gut microbiome, or a massive percentage of the cases that lead back to improving their sleep hygiene and getting their circadian rhythms back on? Like, what are the big common themes that you're seeing in your treatments?
Right. So for me, I kind of got my protocols down to 6 major areas that I was looking at. Gut is huge. Number one, I look at with everyone, because if you do not correct the gut issues, digestion and assimilation, and making sure that gut lining is intact to absorb your nutrients, that's where our health is coming from. It's the whole theme here, it's food being our medicine, and the theme is coffee here. But if that food is supposed to heal you, if it has information for your body to help it and to heal it and to make you healthy, and you cannot absorb or assimilate those nutrients, everything's going off track from there. It's 100%. Like kind of that one piece in Jenga, like the one piece that's going to make the whole thing fall is the gut.
Wow. That doesn't surprise me that you listed that at the top. And you just exactly explained my journey into functional medicine, which I told you off air. But the exact same thing, lacking of a specific micronutrient that wasn't allowing me to absorb proteins correctly, and it was causing me crippling headaches. Like, what? Mm-hmm. You're talking about proteins in your gut causing your head? Oh, yeah. Trust me, it was not fun. So, yeah, I'm glad you put gut at the top, though. But please continue down that list.
Right. So after gut, then I look at adrenals and cortisol levels, because, again, I think probably the top complaint that I get with people coming in is fatigue. And if they haven't used that as their chief complaint, then if I ask them, are you fatigued? Are you tired all the time? They're like, oh, yes. Oh, you were just too tired and forgot to tell me. And so I look at adrenals and cortisol levels. Cortisol and thyroid go together. Cortisol hormone and thyroid hormone need to work together in order to function. So there's, like you said, a lot of thyroid issues that we're seeing, and the thyroid is being addressed, but a lot of times the adrenals aren't being addressed. So a lot of times you'll treat the thyroid, but if you don't treat the adrenals, they could get worse with thyroid and, kind of have this whole fallout from there. And, that's one of the things that I learned later in the practice, and not kind of right up front in all my studying and research. Definitely looking at thyroid hormone levels.
Wow.
Subacute thyroid issues, rampant, and it can cause symptoms, so if someone's symptomatic, and the predominance of research and literature on thyroid is treat people symptomatically. Maybe somebody will disagree with that, but we can walk through the literature. I'm okay with that. Unlike how we were taught in school. And so when you treat symptomatically, people feel better, they have energy, they can, do everything that they need to do. Their metabolism works a lot better. They tend to lose weight. All those symptoms of hypothyroidism go away. So it's like, if you have the whole compilation of symptoms, but the lab results don't match up, there are reasons why.
Jeez.
I look at nutrient levels, like you were saying, micronutrients, definitely looking at that. Inflammatory markers, I look at those, and the regular biochemical markers that we look at as far as standard medicine, but the way I interpret those results are
you expand the ranges. Yeah, we've talked about this on the show before, maybe just to catch up for people who may be just now learning about functional medicine. Traditional medicine, the ranges in which they test those levels, they're looking for a pathology. They're looking for something that's already horribly wrong. So what functional medicine does is basically expand those ranges to where they're, just wider ranges. You're more concerned. You're trying to catch it before it's a pathology, treat it with natural means, so you don't have to get a freaking surgery or a prescription, right?
Absolutely.
That's what I'm saying. They work. That's what bothers me is these two types of medicines work great together. We really need to accept, we need to accept that the key is to integrate these two. But yeah, that's really the one that fixed me was the micronutrient test, I guess. Is that an accurate way to do it? It was the blood test.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Love that one.
And, like you said, integrating the two, functional medicine and conventional medicine, I 100% agree. And once people have gotten burned by conventional, it's hard for them to get to trust the system again. And I'm like,
That's
no,
true.
you need your primary doctor. You need, your specialist. And if you come to me with a huge tumor, I don't have anything to shrink that for you. There are things in the literature out there, but I haven't studied those well enough to help somebody through that process and to get a consistent result. But I'm like, I don't know, go to a surgeon.
Sometimes you need a surgeon, man. Sometimes you just need a surgeon. Yeah, I am all for the integration, and I think that's the future. I think that's the path forward. Where did we leave off on this list, though? We were down to 3. Now we're on the 4th. Is that right?
I think I mentioned all of them. Gut, cortisol, thyroid. I didn't mention
cortisol
hormones.
and thyroid are separate. Okay.
I definitely do hormones. The other bioidentical hormones, cortisol, thyroid, and the other sex hormones are all hormones. But I kind of look at them separately because of the way they work in the body. Kind of cortisol and thyroid are your core hormones, and then all the other ones, your testosterone, estradiol, for women, progesterone. All those are kind of around that, if we kind of look at it as a wheel and the spokes around there. And so I look at that as well, even in younger people. And so I'm seeing a lot of people with low hormone levels, and they're young, and I'm like, oh, this is not good. And there are reasons why. A lot of times it goes back to the gut. So that's why I say gut first, because your hormones are produced from cholesterol. Sorry. And so cholesterol is a precursor for your cortisol, your sex hormones. And so if you're not absorbing and assimilating those nutrients, like what we were talking about, then your hormone levels are going to be low typically, because you're not absorbing cholesterol the way you should. So therefore, your body doesn't have the precursors to make them the way it should. So,
and when you put gut first, usually the repair protocol for gut is pretty huge, right? Like, there's usually some sort of probiotic involved. You're going to change your diet to cut out processed foods and excess sugars, and you're going to eat more green vegetables and healthy grass-fed meats, and you're going to focus on your sleep, and you're going to get exercise. Like, all of those things contribute to your gut microbiota, right?
Right. And so microbiome is one part of the gut, but then you also have your enzymes and how well your body is producing enzymes, how well your body is producing acid. In order to break down foods, it's a 2-step process, especially proteins. The first step is acid. The second step is enzymes. The acid denatures your protein, so it kind of takes it from a clump or a ball form and straightens it out into the chain form. And then the enzymes come through and kind of break those amino acid chains down into absorbable smaller pieces, so it can kind of get absorbed. And so that's a huge part of gut as well as the probiotics and microbiome and all that, and other types of gut dysfunction like overgrowth of yeast and other bacteria.
Yeah. Oh, that's a huge one. Parasites too. I know someone who went through this testing, and they were like, "Yeah, you have an excess of parasites." And this is someone who's traveled. This is someone who's traveled the world. He's been all over the world and probably accumulated it from traveling. That's so creepy. This is fascinating. I'm so interested in this functional medicine subject as a whole. And I really just want to cover the stories, the real stories of people who couldn't find answers elsewhere, and, found it with strange, I mean, it's not really that strange when you put it, so simply, but this not exactly mainstream approach to solving your health problems.
Yeah, and it's odd, why it's not so mainstream.
I think it's growing.
Difficult. Yeah, it is, but it's difficult for anybody to keep up with all the information that's out there. I mean, it's just impossible. There's so many studies. Nobody can keep up with all of them. They did a study about reading studies, and they were talking about it would take, from all the research that comes out in 1 year, it would take one person 10 years to read 1 year's worth of research.
Right.
And so it's like, we don't have that kind of time. Nobody can know everything. So like you're saying, it has to be a collaboration. Everybody's just good at their component, their little niche of what they do. And we have to help each other along the way.
Man, it's really, really wild stuff. I got to ask about coffee, especially when you're talking about adrenals, when you're talking about energy levels, because if you follow this show, Coffee is not just a caffeine delivery system. It's rich with antioxidants and all these healthy compounds. But if you look at the health studies between caffeinated and decaffeinated coffee, caffeinated coffee has all these extra benefits, massive extra benefits. Somehow the caffeine synergizes with the other compounds. And you don't see these benefits from Monster Energy drinks or No Dose or 5 Hour Energy or any of the other caffeine delivery systems. So let me ask you, I want you to take the gloves off. I want you to be honest. When you're working with people who have these adrenal problems, I mean, caffeine can really be a tough subject for them. What are your thoughts on caffeinated coffee and coffee in general and your version of functional wellness?
Yes. So I think my first interaction with coffee for most people is asking them about their coffee intake history, because that's usually a clue for me that they're going to have something going on with their adrenals. So once they're drinking 3-4 plus cups a day, then I'm like, we might need to check your adrenals to see what's going on. So some people use it as a patch or a compensation for what their body is not doing as far as their cortisol levels.
Right.
And so the reason people reach for and use caffeine a lot is because it works. It does give you energy. I was on call on Sunday, and so by Tuesday, I didn't get much sleep. I kind of laid down at 3:00 in the morning. Oof. And I was like wiped out, exhausted. And I was like, oh, my coffee came in from you guys.
Oh, yeah. Love
it. Coffee. It just come in. I'm like, oh, I'm going to try it. Now, I'm the type of person who drinks maybe coffee 3 to 6 times a year. Not much. But, sometimes it's like, hey, I want some coffee.
Special treat. That'll really get you going.
Exactly. And I did make it a special treat.
You're awesome,
and so I hooked up the Keurig and everything because I don't brew it. I don't drink enough to know how to brew.
Nice. The Keurig is fine. That's great.
Exactly. And so I brewed a cup, and my husband is looking like, what are you doing? Drink coffee. And it was great. About 15 minutes later, I mean, I'm telling you, I was like a zombie. It was maybe 11 o'clock and I still wasn't like fully alert. And so I drank it around 11:15. I was like, okay, I'm starting to perk up here. Then by 30 minutes later, I was like, okay, I'm feeling pretty great. And then, I was cleaning up the house after that. So
oh my God, I love it. There was a really interesting article by Michael Pollan on kind of how what you just described shaped our Western world and kind of drove the Industrial Revolution, and the traditional work shifts that we now enjoy and all this stuff. And it's I really like that testament, especially from the medical field. But I do see what you're saying too, which is if you ask someone, what's your coffee drinking like? And they say, I drink caffeinated all day to get through the day. That says something about their health right off the bat. That's interesting. And so that's why I always recommend mixing in the decafs personally, because you shouldn't need that all day, every day. Although some people can just drink it and then go to sleep. I don't know what's up with these crazy people and their crazy biology, but I've seen people who can nap on coffee.
That would be me, Jordan, that you're talking to.
Oh my, that's nuts.
It's me. So
that's nuts.
Leaving high school, I was going to college, and everybody's like, oh, you'll start drinking coffee in college. You have to pull all-nighters and such and such. So I'm like, okay, great. So it got to the point where I needed to actually pull an all-nighter, write a report and study for a test the next day and all these things. So I'm like, okay, let's walk into the meal hall because it was open 24 hours.
Yeah.
Exactly. And get some coffee. And I'm so excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's going to keep me up all night. This is going to be great. I drank it. 30 minutes later, I was dead asleep. I was like,
that's crazy.
This was
might have been weak coffee. Who knows? That's funny though. I worry though that you're going to say that when someone does have an adrenal problem or something, that you recommend that they probably cut out the caffeine, right? That can't be good for an already damaged adrenal system. Not a young, college student's adrenal system, but a worn out, you know what I mean?
Well, I don't necessarily take people off the coffee. I use it as a gauge for me to see how much they feel they are requiring to get through their day. So kind of I can use it as a reference point. Okay, you were drinking 6 cups of coffee when we met, and now you're down to 4, and now you're down to 2. without, feeling those effects of the low energy.
That's like me and my nap count. I can tell if I'm treating my body well because I'll take a nap in the middle of the day, and if I'm eating junk food and I'm not exercising, it's the nap count that gives it away. So I like that. And you're right. When your body is producing those hormones naturally, magically, you don't hit that wall in the afternoon. If you avoid processed foods and sugars and all this stuff, magically you don't need that sub sandwich nap at 1:30 p.m. That is my golden time right there. So okay, I'm glad that the coffee got a pretty good pass from functional medicine specialist Dr. Angela Mosely. I like that.
Yeah, and I'm not religious about anything. I'm like, you absolutely cannot do this and you absolutely must do this. I like to educate people and have them make informed decisions. Right. I will give you the information and you make the decision that you feel is best for you.
I like that. Amazing. Listen, Dr. Angela Mosely, I feel like that's a good place to wrap it up as any. Now, I know you're working on momawellness.com, MOMA wellness.com. It's going to be live shortly here as you hear this. So this is going to be a library for functional medicine information. Is that the idea?
Absolutely. The idea is for it to be a community where we can come and have discussions about these things. I think there's so much information out there just free floating, and it's hard to decipher, what exactly applies to me and what doesn't. So that's to help people kind of cipher through the information and get good, usable information that will be effective for them in their wellness journey.
You're running a health and wellness challenge September 14th through 18th. Like we said, the website is in production right now. We'll be live shortly, momawellness.com. I am happy to send my listeners over there. Dr. Mosely, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jordan. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, totally. Keep us updated, of course. And everybody listening, stay subscribed. Stay tuned. We got some fantastic coffee content, some health content, some coffee history content coming at you soon. That's all for today. This is Dr. Angela Mosely and Jordan River signing off, saying we'll see you next time on the Coffee, Health, and Science podcast, everybody. Bye-bye.